All right, welcome back to America's Voice Live. Glad you're here. Card network titans Visa and MasterCard were on the defensive Tuesday when their executives were grilled by members of Congress at a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting. The hearing was focused on the proposed Credit Card Competition Act, which would require the financial institutions that issue credit cards to ensure that merchants have access to networks other than Visa and MasterCard, which clearly dominate the industry. The thrust of the bill is to spur competition among networks to reduce the interchange fees that merchants are charged for processing consumers' credit card payments. The National Taxpayers Union has been studying this legislation and argues that despite good intentions, this legislation will not increase competition, will actually harm consumers. Here with me to discuss this is the national president of the Taxpayers Union, National Taxpayers Union President Pete Sepp. Pete, nice to see you again.
Pleasure as always.
So tell me about this this act, this idea to lower the fees to consumers. Will it actually work?
I'm afraid it's nothing new because it's been tried on the debit card side. This Credit Card Competition Act is a form of mandated competition, price controls, routing mandates, things that have been tried before with debit cards to disastrous results. In fact, the so-called Durbin-Marshall interchange fee bill, it sounds complex, but basically it says that card payment networks are limited in the amount of fees they can charge retailers on each transaction. Sounds like a great idea until you realize the companies have to invest billions of dollars for network security, and they have to recover those fees somehow. The predictable result, less than 1.2% of retailers actually passed along the savings in lower fees to consumers. Meanwhile, banks that tie bank accounts to those debit cards ended up ending free checking for upwards of half of all free checking account customers, raised the minimum balance amount by about $400 for each account. And this was supposed to help consumers. It certainly didn't with debit cards. It won't with credit cards.
Pete, what's the high end? What's the top end? What's the legal allowed interest rate on a credit card debt? Is it 29.99%?
Yeah, it's around 30%. But in addition to actual interest rate limits, there are limits on transactions.
That's loan sharking. Donald Trump was not wrong when he called 30% interest on a credit card balance loan sharking. Should there not be some sort of a cap that's lower than 30% on a credit card debt?
Well, there are state laws as well on usury and the interest charged there. I think we have to pay attention, though, to the fact that you have an advertised rate of 30% or whatever. That's also calculated on a daily basis on the balance. The actual effective rate could be even lower than that. So that's important to remember. Also important to remember is all of the credit card rewards that are at stake here. If we're not going to have any kind of ability for the card companies to charge for using their networks, well, they're going to recover it somehow by reducing credit card rewards. It happened again with credit cards in places like Australia and Spain, happened with debit cards too, when these price controls were imposed. The problem is Congress and the federal executive branch like to regulate these things in the name of competition, but the result is often the opposite. You know, that's what they're saying right now. They're complaining that Visa and MasterCard have a duopoly of payment networks. Well, there's Discover and others, but allowing competition to proceed would mean, say, allowing the merger between Capital One and Discover to create an even more robust payment network to compete. Oops, the federal government isn't doing that. They're opposing that merger.
I've got to be honest,
so
though, Pete.
They're undercutting their own competition.
I mean, got to be honest. I don't think people that are paying 30% credit card interest are worried about getting frequent flyer miles, I don't think they have the money to buy an airline ticket. But maybe I'm wrong. And generally, I would not normally disagree with you. But I think loan sharking is loan sharking, and I think that Donald Trump has some points here. We'll see where it all plays out, and we'll stay with you on it, of course. And you're right. Some things are going to have to change if these things are allowed to happen. And like I say, we'll keep people up to speed. Pete Sepp, President, National Taxpayers Union, thank you as always.
Absolutely.